Hello everyone, welcome back to another chess video with me, Hooky Joe. Today we're going to do something a little different. Instead of playing a game or um, going through a tournament or anything like that, today I'm actually going to recap a game that I played in August last year that I thought had a very nice checkmate at the end. Very hard to um, get going, you know, kind of put the pieces together to make everything happen to get it to the mate. So let's jump right into it. We've got it pulled up here, as you can see. So this was about the time that I really started to learn the King's Indian defense or King's Indian attack, not defense, because I was white. So, and this is what you see in a lot of my videos now is I start with Knight F3. Knight F3 is um, a hyper opening, hyper attack. You know, you're attacking the center with a piece instead of a pawn. So instead of playing e4, e3, d4, d3, c5 or f5 or f4, c4, f4, you start with a knight, you attack the center, take control of a couple squares. You know, if opponent plays here, there's a gambit opening. I forget the name of it, but all in all, opponent plays d5. D5 is a completely fine move here. As you can see, it's still very equal. You got the eval bar right there on the left, and then you've got up here, you've got, you know, your lines and what it leads to in every line. Like A3 here, it's completely even. Those are the computer moves. So D4 is completely fine against Knight F3. I go with what I know. D3, you know, prevents, you know, E5, E4 from my opponent. Also opens up the lines from my dark squared bishop here. You know, I've got these lines. Uh, my knight can come here. You know, I can play e4 with protection now. It just allows a lot. Opponent comes out and plays, you know, knight c6. Completely fine move. Getting pieces out. Always develop your knights before your bishops because you know where they're going to go. I go knight b d2. This is the b knight. I put on d2. For anyone who doesn't really know that much about chess, I'll explain the moves, where they're going, why, along with some annotations. But knight b d2, it supports this knight, so if the bishop decides to come, not there, if the bishop decides to go here, then I'm defending with this knight, and I don't have to ruin my pawn structure by taking with a pawn. So I play here. Opponent goes for e5, which is fine because now the knight defends e5. Their knight's covering e5 and d4. Again, completely fine. Everything's still pretty standard. I go for e4 myself, attacking the center with a pawn this time. So everything's all right. My opponent's slightly better here by 2/10 of a pawn, 2/10 of a point. Nothing crazy, still pretty equal. Opponent decides to push, which, as you can see by the eval bar and the computer moves over here, is a slight mistake. Why is that a mistake? Because he's over advancing. He's getting his pawn stranded here. You know, this pawn's a little loose. You know, this can be undermined by just playing c3, and it's forced to trade off, and I can get pawns towards the center. You know, keep building my center. Building the center is always a good thing. You know, if I can get two center pawns and, you know, get my opponent out, it's, you know, better for me. So I go ahead. I play g3. I want to go ahead and fianchetto this bishop. You know, put it here. You know, that way I can go ahead and castle this way and get my king safe. King safety is another very important rule here. Now black is slightly better because I didn't play c3. It's whatever, it's fine. Opponent plays knight f6. Again, just developing the knight, nothing crazy. Not really hitting anything, but still getting the knight out. I go ahead and play c3 here. I know I probably should have played the bishop here to fianchetto it, but I played c3 because I wanted to go ahead and get this d pawn out of here. Opponent takes, I take back with my pawn. Opponent was going to bring his bishop out. Completely fine. It's a fine move. I can't go, you know, d4 because there are three pieces attacking. I'm sorry, four pieces. The pawn, bishop, knight, and queen all attack the d4 square. Well, I've only got a pawn and a knight defending it. Now, the queen would, but I've got it blocked by this knight, which is still fine. So I moved the knight, and now I've got the knight. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, still fine. Opponent moves the bishop back because he knows if I push, it's going to hit the bishop. I played h3 here. I couldn't really tell you why, unless I'm just trying to stop this knight from, I'm sorry, trying to stop this knight from coming here, or this bishop from coming here, putting pressure on this knight. I guess back then I wasn't really a big fan of this pin hitting the queen, so I can't move the knight. But it's all right. Kind of inaccurate, but it works out in the end. Opponent gets his king safe. His king is safe before mine. I fianchetto this other bishop, lining up on this pawn, also supporting the d4 push. Opponent backs his knight up. This allows the d4 push again, but I play it, and now this is kind of loose. This e4 pawn is really loose here. Not really a great thing, but the d4 pawn is very overprotected. Two knights, a bishop, and a queen all defend it. Opponent takes the e4 pawn, and I just fianchetto my bishop. I accept my loss, and I fianchetto. Opponent plays, knight g6, which I don't really understand the point in this move, unless he was trying to. I honestly don't know where this knight was going to go. I go ahead and castle, get my king safe. He backs his other knight up. I play rook over, just because there's an open file here. The file's completely open. Nothing is blocking this rook from seeing all the way across the board. There are no pawns that can block or get in the way or anything like that. So I do. He brings his bishop out. I pull my knight back. And I pulled my knight back because I wanted to attack this pawn, which hits the rook. And yeah, you just move the rook out of the way. It's whatever. It's all fine. But I really just wanted to attack the b7 pawn. It's all this move did. It was the only thing I saw in the moment. It's all I wanted. I didn't want to move the knight forward because it could have overextended it. Didn't want to get too crazy with it. Just keep it solid. So opponent stops that. They play c6. They're like, no, you're not getting my b7 pawn. Get out of here with that crap. I'm like, okay. So I move my king over. So because I really want to play f5, f4. I just want this pawn push. I want to get these pawns rolling, get them up, kick my opponent's pieces out, and checkmate. Somewhere on that side, we're just attacking the castled king here. That's my only plan, is to attack this king by pushing all these pawns, just get them rolling. Now, my opponent's king is really safe because there are so many pieces that are defending here. My king has two defenders, and there are a couple pieces that are just way far away from my king. Isn't really good, but again, it's all right. Now, I didn't take this bishop because I saw that if I take, then this comes with check, and I didn't like that, so I made it worse. Opponent, takes with check. I come down. He checks again. I push this pawn. All right, I'm playing f3. Now, as you see, the eval bar hates this move. It is like -4 for black. It's just cringing at the idea of anything. This pawn is still over defended. My king safety is iffy right now. I think there's a knight move. Okay, yeah. Opponent wants me to trade the rook, but I want control of the open file, so I don't move my rook. I keep control of this open file right here, which ends up being a huge mistake because of this. And now that I've taken this rook, my knight is hanging because there's no defender of this knight because this pawn is up here and this the queen has moved from defending it. However, I am still attacking this bishop. My opponent pushes the bishop back, and I move my knight out of the way. This pawn is still defended by my bishop. This knight is not really doing anything here. If opponent pushes here, I take here, and then you can take back with a bishop. That's fine. Big trade. I end up losing a pawn out of it. Instead, he moves the rook over. Why he moved the rook over, I could never tell you. So I'll go ahead and I push this pawn. Why did I push this pawn? I have no idea why I went a6 here. So I go a6, and he just pushes. He's like, I don't have to trade it. I'm not going to trade it. Oh, that's fine. Now this knight is under attack again. So I move it back where I'm hitting this knight. So I'm just hitting the knight. That's all it is. It's a move just to get out of the way of the pawn, just to not lose a knight. And it was like the only safe square, I believe. It wasn't the only one, but it was the only one where I wasn't going to get kicked around a whole bunch. But that's all right. We're here. He takes. I take back with a pawn. I don't want to trade queens because I'm down material. I'm down the exchange. He rotates the queen over. Perfect. Fine. Doesn't hit anything. Doesn't get hit by anything. It is threatening this pawn, but this queen is still defending. So you've got to make sure that this queen keeps defending this pawn. Always be aware of the long range attack. Bishops are scary. Knights are annoying. I put my knight here to kick the queen away. This queen is very annoying. I don't like it. I want it gone. He checks me. Now, this check works because of this pin. The queen is pinning the pawn to the king. So if I take here, like that's an illegal move because the queen would take the king. Now I have a very tough decision to make. And I spent some time on this move. Because if I move here, which I think I really wanted to do, there's this move, this knight move. And this knight move would allow a fork. So if I moved here, the knight moves here, that is check again. And my opponent wins the queen. And the bishop's hit. And it's just game over at that point. You know, let's say, oh, it's awful actually. If I move here, bishop comes here, or the knight goes there. Let's say I move down, knight takes, I take back. Queen would take on g3, and I'm losing the knight as well by force. So at that point, I'd be down to a bishop and a rook versus a queen, bishop, and rook. And it's a completely lost endgame. No matter how many pawns I've got, the queen's going to gobble them all up, and I'm going to lose. So I move away. I move to h2, out of the way of the knight, out of the way of the queen. There's no threat anymore. There are no checks. I'm just making sure everything's good. Opponent moves there anyway, which is a complete blunder because they have given up their queen. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but Joe, your queen's hanging too. And that's fine because of the following sequence. I take the queen, they take the queen, I get their rook. My knight is not hit, so now I'm up a piece. I'm just up a clean piece. I bring my knight back. I get it to safety. Everything's good. We're chilling. I push my pawn. I block it. Because I know if this pawn gets here, then this pawn's in trouble. Well, it wasn't really because of the knight. But if I want to move the knight at any given point, I can. So I get it out of the way. I bring my king down. It's fine. I'm up, 4 points of material. He's pushing all his pawns now. Fine. I'll take your hanging pawn. You left it undefended. I'll take it. So now he wants to hit the pawn. I'll give a check, and I'm win your rook, your bishop. The rook takes a bishop. Another undefended piece. Another blunder by my opponent. Pawn defends it. Opponent takes the pawn. Sure, it's fine. Now I get to take this pawn with check, with a discovered attack. So the rook is seeing all the way. The bishop is seeing all the way through here. Bishop sees through here. As soon as that pawn gets away, that's a check. King has to move. I check here. King moves down. I take this pawn. This pawn. Why did I take the a pawn? Because the only thing that is stopping my a pawn from going all the way. So he takes my pawn, and I probably should have gone for a trade here, but it's all right. I'll just keep trying to get stuff. I'm leaving my rook hanging because of this little tactic here. If my opponent takes my rook, I take his rook and I make a queen. And then I've got queen, knight, bishop for a king. So he instead moves his rook over. I move my rook all the way over as to not get attacked by anything. He wants to move his king over. That's fine. He just wants to take that pawn. He wants to get it out of there, so I trade. And now we have a it's move 44. And we have knight, bishop, and 2 pawns versus 2 pawns. Now it's knight, bishop, and 2 pawns versus 1 pawn. And now this king is going to get pulled into this corner. Into this corner that this bishop has been eyeing down the whole game. It is plus 65 for me. I've been moving my knight out of the way because it's being attacked by the king. I let that happen. Everything I have is defended. The knight can't be taken because I moved the bishop back down to defend it. The pawn is defended by the king. I start moving my king up. I want this pawn promoted. I start moving my king up. The king keeps moving towards the corner. Opponent really wants a stalemate here. At this point, I have seen a glaring issue. This knight is covering these 2 squares. This bishop covers all the way through this diagonal, and this king is covering all 3 of these squares. Right now, if I move my pawn, it's stalemate. It is stalemate because my opponent would have no legal moves. I see this. I'm running out of time here. So I move my bishop back down, just so that my opponent can get back in the corner. It is my opponent's only legal move, and he does. So I move my pawn up. Now this pawn is covering this square. The king covers this square. The knight is still covering here and here. And the bishop moves here, but again, there's only one legal move. So pawn check. And the only legal move is for my opponent to go here. The pawn covers here. And then we have checkmate with bishop b2, long range, knight, bishop, pawn checkmate. And it is just one of the most beautiful checkmates I've ever had. My most proud moment. I got this on stream, actually. It was a glorious moment. I really enjoyed it. Had a lot of fun. But yeah, I just wanted to share one of my most memorable games. Next time I'll show my worst win ever. But for now, we're gonna leave it at that. I appreciate you guys for watching. And just a second here, we're gonna plug some stuff. All right. If you have aim chess or you want to try it out, get better at your chess game, specialized just for you, designed by how you play and the games you've played before on whatever site, whether it be Elite Chess, Chess24, or Chess.com. Go to Aim Chess, use code Hokie30, save 30% for a 1-month subscription. My Instagram is HokieJoe17, and my Twitch is also HokieJoe17. With all that said, I appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.